3 Apache sisters left to die in the square until the rancher showed up. That noon, Elias Turner only meant to ride into the town of Dry Cedar for salt, a few rolls of wire, and a letter. Sun beat down on the main street. Red dust hung in the air. Store doors banged open and shut. Elias was the quiet kind of rancher. When his errands were done, he headed straight back to his place 3 miles out, kept clear of noise and trouble. He would have gone right past the town square that day if it had not been for the shouting and the sharp, high laughter of a crowd up ahead that made his feet stop. In the middle of the square, under the wooden frame where they usually tacked up posters for horse sales, 3 Apache women were hanging upside down by their ankles from a crossbeam. Their hands were tied behind their backs. Black hair streamed down into the dusty ground. Their clothes were torn to rags. Dark skin showed bruises and scrapes. A few men stood with hands on their hips, spitting and tossing orange peels at them, the way you might throw at a feed sack. A knot of children crowded behind them, eyes wide, learning how to laugh at the sight of human beings strung up without a single question asked. Elias stopped as if someone had grabbed a fistful of his coat and yanked him back. On the oldest sister's wrist, right where the rope bit into her skin, someone had tied a narrow strip of worn cloth. Faded green thread ran in a pattern he knew. Years earlier, on a blizzard night, an Apache woman with that same stitch on her clothing had come to his cabin to help his wife through a hard birth. The baby had not lived. His wife had not either. Yet that woman had wiped the sweat from his brow and kept him alive through the fever that followed. When she left, she had only said, "If one day you see this stitching again, remember that someone in my people once counted you as a person." Ever since, Elias had carried a debt he had no way to pay. Now that same line of stitches shone in the hard noon light. He pushed through the circle of onlookers and stepped closer. The oldest sister's face was swollen, but her eyes were open. She did not beg. She did not plead. The middle sister's breathing was rough. Her body swung each time the wind touched her. The youngest was smaller, her lips split and bloody. Her eyes were still very young, full of fear, yet she was fighting not to cry, as if she refused to give the crowd one more scrap of her weakness. "What is this?" Elias asked, his voice low. The nearest man, a livestock trader who would buy and sell anything that turned a profit, turned and gave a crooked smile. "3 Apaches," he said. "Caught them near the logging camp. Folks say they were guiding outlaws. That is enough. We hang them here from morning till dark so all of Dry Cedar can see. When night comes, we cut them down and haul the bodies outside town. Saves us the trouble of a trial." "Any man see them kill anybody?" Elias asked. The trader shrugged. "Turner, this is the West," he said. "You find a face too close to trouble, that is enough. Out here, people need a warning more than they need justice." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Elias did not laugh. He saw the raw scratches running down the youngest girl's shins. They looked more like the marks of someone who had walked a long, hard trail than those of a raider lying in wait around a lumber camp. He thought about his own cattle, how they bunched up and shoved when he pushed them through a creek. And then he looked again at the 3 bodies hung up for the town to stare at. Something deep in his chest, old and heavy as a rock at the bottom of a well, shifted. "How much?" he asked. The crowd fell silent. The trader narrowed his eyes. "Oh, what did you say?" "I asked," Elias said again, "if I cut them down and take them to my ranch, how much do I have to pay you people to stop treating them like meat hung out in the sun?" A woman's voice rang out from somewhere in the back. "You have lost your mind, Turner? 3 Apaches strung up to die, and you want to bring them home?" A few snorts and mean little laughs echoed after her words. The trader wet his lips, eyes flicking from Elias to the 3 swaying figures. Elias unbuckled the leather pouch at his belt and spilled his savings into the dust. Coins he had put aside for years to buy better breeding stock rolled and chimed against one another. The small bright sound of metal on packed earth sliced through the quiet. "Is that enough?" he asked. The trader stared at the money, then at Elias. "If you want to carry trouble back to your place, that is your affair," he said slowly. "That pile there, call it payment to claim the bodies, but get them gone before the sun hits the edge of that roof over there. I do not want to see their shadows in this square when the market closes." Elias nodded. He picked up the knife he usually used to cut reins and lead ropes and walked to the beam. As he looked up, the oldest sister's eyes met his. There was no thank you in them, no spoken plea. Only one clear question, louder than all the jeers and whispers around them. What will this white man do with the 3 lives he has just bought back out of the hands of death? Cutting the first rope took everything Elias had. When the older sister's ankle slipped free, her heavy body dropped. He was ready for it. He caught her by the shoulders and eased her down as slowly as he could. The middle sister and the youngest followed one after another. The crowd began to drift away, partly because the sight was no longer entertaining, partly because the sun was climbing and everybody wanted to go home to dinner. "Can you stand?" Elias asked. He tried to keep his voice even. The oldest sister drew a long breath. She was almost as tall as he was. Her shoulders were thick with muscle, yet her bare arms trembled as the blood came back into them after so many hours upside down. "I can," she said in rough but clear English. "I only need the ground under my feet." The middle sister bent over and held her ribs. The younger one was small. The moment her feet touched earth, she staggered. Elias held out his hand. She stared at that hand as if it were some strange tool, then after a heartbeat laid her swollen fingers in his calloused palm. "Come with me," Elias said. "My horse is tied off that way. The ranch is not far. Out there, fewer eyes." The 3 sisters traded a quick burst of Apache. Elias could not understand the words, only the tight beat of them. The eldest nodded. "If you mean to kill us, you can do it here," she said flatly. "You paid the money. You can do what you like. But my sister needs to lie down. If she does not, she will die on your feet." Elias shook his head. "I did not buy anyone to kill them," he said. "I do not need servants either. I only could not watch one more living thing get hung up and pretend that is the law." He paused. "You come to my place. If you want to leave after that, I will find horses and water. No one will hold you there." The road from town to the ranch was dust and the buzz of insects in the grass. Elias rode in front with a firm grip on the reins, and he looked back every so often. The eldest walked in the middle and steadied the second sister. The youngest trailed behind, her steps uneven yet stubborn. She would not reach for his arm again. Now and then, Elias slowed his horse so they would not fall too far back. Not so much that they would feel driven either. By the time his small wooden house came into view, alone in a patch of pasture with a few scattered cypress trees, the sun had already begun to slide west. The roof had been patched more times than he could remember. Parts of the fence around the cattle yard leaned. One thing was still clear. This was a place built for one man, not for a crowd. "This is it," the youngest sister whispered. It was the first thing she had said since morning. Her voice was hoarse, but you could still hear how young she was. "Yes," Elias answered. "It is not much to look at, but it has a roof." He led the horse into the small barn, then opened the door to the house. Inside was one big room with a stove and a table in the corner where he slept, and a small room in back that had been more storage than anything else. He pointed to the washpan. "You can use this water to clean up a little," he said. I left some clean cloth on the chair. That room back there, it was my wife's once. It is empty now. If the three of you want to sleep near each other, you can lie there. I will sleep out here, in the kitchen." The sisters stood in the doorway, as if the line between dust outside and boards inside was some invisible barrier thicker than the ropes in the square. The oldest, at last, stepped across. Her eyes swept the room. No chains, no iron bars, no hooks to hang a body from. Just a cold stove, a wooden table, a few pegs for coats, a handful of worn chairs. "What is your name?" she asked. "Elias Turner." "Elias Turner," she repeated, tasting the sound of it. "I am Sa. This is Leah." She nodded toward the middle sister. "And the little one is Tiva." Tiva dipped her hands into the washpan and flinched at the shock of cool water. She whispered in Apache, and Leah answered, her voice soothing. Sa turned back to Elias. "You brought us here because of a debt to the woman who saved you," she said. "But you must know the people in town will not forget this. A white man's house. 3 Apaches who came down from the hanging beam and walked into it. They will not call that kindness. People rarely call things by their true name," Elias said. He bent to rebuild the fire and set a pot of water over it. "If they want to talk, they can talk. My ears have had practice for a long time." Sa was quiet for a while. Then she tipped her head slightly. "Tonight," she said. "We will stay here. Only tonight. In the morning, if the sun still rises, we go on. There is a thing we must do." "All right." Elias nodded. "Tonight this is a stopover. Tomorrow, if you choose to leave, I will have horses and food ready." Dark came quickly, the way it always did in that country. Elias sat on the porch with his rifle by his chair and his eyes on the dark field. From inside came the low thread of voices in a language he could not follow, mixed with the crackle of the fire. He did not know what the 3 sisters were speaking of in those hushed tones. The name of someone lost, the direction of the wind that would lead them home, the memory of a burned-out village. He only knew one thing. From the moment he cut those ropes in the square, the quiet, straight trail of his life had bent in a new direction. And come morning, the words they had said, "There is something we still have to do," would draw him along behind them, even though he did not yet know what the something was. That night, Elias lay on the long bench in the kitchen, and his eyes stayed open. The house had grown used to 1 set of lungs. Now it held 4. Every time a floorboard gave a small creak, he felt it, the sure knowledge that he was no longer living alone the way he had for 7 years. The door of the small back room opened softly. Sa stepped out onto the porch, thinking he was asleep. Lamplight from inside brushed across her bruised face. "If you are still awake," she said, stopping a few steps away, "I have something to ask you." "Go ahead," Elias answered. "How long has your wife been gone?" 7 years, he said slowly. "She died in childbirth. The baby did too. Since then, it has been only me and a few stubborn cows." Sa gave a small nod. She did not say, "I am sorry." There was only a short silence, just long enough for him to feel that she understood loss. "The debt you carry to the Apache woman who saved you," she went on. "Do you think it is paid with 1 bag of money and 1 night under your roof for my sisters and me?" Elias looked out into the dark yard. "I do not think that debt will ever be paid," he admitted. "But if I had walked past that square today and turned my back, I would have picked up another one. The kind of debt a man cannot sleep with." Sa studied him for a moment. "In the morning we are leaving," she said. "We are not running. There is no home to go back to. We are going to find a man, a white overseer who sold our village to the gold men in the south. He took money and signed papers and watched while they tied the women and chained the men and burned the lodges. My father died at his feet. I do not forget that face. Her tone was flat, yet every word fell like a stone. In the doorway behind her, Leah spoke, one arm still wrapped around her ribs. They caught us when we went back to look for our uncle, she said. They sent him out to work the railroad in the desert. That overseer keeps a book with all the names. We have to reach him. If our uncle is still alive, we bring him home. If he is dead, then at least someone from his own house will stand where he fell. Elias saw it in his mind. The fences, the rough shacks, men bent under the sun. A small table where one man signed away the lives of others, then went home to his supper. It was not a picture he found strange. You three mean to walk all the way out there? He asked. How far is it? 3 days if we do not lose the trail, Saw said. When we are more used to our own feet than to the wheels of other people's wagons. And when you find this overseer? Elias asked. What then? That depends on what I see in his eyes, Saw replied. Fear or nothing at all. There are debts that are not paid with money. You do not have to take them on. Today, you already did your part. Elias looked down at his dust-caked boots. He thought of the letter still sitting at the post office, the north fence that needed mending, the cattle that had to be moved. Then he thought of 3 women whose ankles still bore the rope marks, walking into a labor camp guarded only by rifles and a white man's sign. In the morning, he said at last, his voice low but steady, I am going with you. Saw frowned. Turner, this is not your fight. It was not this afternoon either, Elias said with a small shrug. Not until I saw them hang you 3 up. I know the road. I know the faces of men who run these camps. I can speak the kind of words they believe. When they look at you, they will only see your skin. If you walk up to that gate alone, there is a good chance they will shoot first and ask later. Leah glanced over at Sa. Tiva peered out from the room behind them, her eyes wide in the dim light. She did not speak, but the whole little house seemed to be holding its breath. If you walk with us, you step into our family's hate, Sa said softly. Well, that is not a light burden. There are debts, Elias answered, that let a man live easy if he stays out of them, but they do not let him rest at night. I have already lost one home. If I sit here clutching the one I have left and do nothing now, I do not think I am the man my wife would have wanted me to be. The 3 sisters were silent. Wind moved across the open field and under the eaves, bringing with it the dry smell of grass. At last Sa nodded, very slowly. All right, she said. In the morning we go. But remember this. We are not something you bought. We go with you. We do not go behind you. Elias nodded in return. I understand, he said. And I do not want anyone to belong to me anymore. If we come back, I hope none of us ends up hanging in that square again. The western night closed around the small house at the edge of the field. In that darkness, the debt of one solitary rancher and the debt of 3 Apache sisters hooked into each other without a sound, ready to pull them all off their old road when dawn came. They left Elias's ranch before the sky had fully lightened. A thin fog lay over the grass. The saddles felt damp and cold. Elias tied a large water skin to his saddle and packed some hard bread, then handed Tiva a thin blanket. She tucked her bruised fingers into its edge right away, as if afraid someone might see she was still weak. The road south did not look like much. A few cactus clumps, some sun-bleached logs, old wagon ruts mixed with cattle tracks. But with every step the horses took, Elias felt the air grow heavier around them. Sa rode beside him. Her back stayed straight, yet her eyes kept sweeping the horizon, as if she expected to see a shape only she would recognize. Leah rode last, one hand resting at her ribs, now and then letting out a small cough. Is it far? Elias asked, mostly to break the silence. When you smell coal and sweat mixed together, Sa said, you will know we are close. She was right. Toward midday, the wind started to bring a sour, thick scent. Beyond a low rise, the camp came into view. A few rough timber barracks, smoke drifting from crooked chimneys, a ring of posts for a fence. At the gate, 2 guards lounged with rifles hanging off their shoulders. Farther out, Elias could see the line of the rails stretching away, and small dark shapes of men pushing carts and carrying ties in the hard glare of the sun. That is where they sold us to, Leah said quietly. But they split us up on the way. Our uncle, if he is still alive, he will be in one of those rows of shacks. Elias looked around, taking the place in. I will go in first, he said. You 3 stay up here by the rocks. Let me see how things stand. No, Tiva burst out. Her voice was rough but sharp. We are done watching from far away. We already watched from the end of a rope in the square. Sa set a hand on her shoulder. Wait, she said. Let him talk to the gate guards. If they start shooting, better they shoot at one man who knows how to run. Elias pressed his lips together and did not argue. He nudged his horse down the slope and rode toward the gate. Not too fast, not slow. The 2 guards looked him over from hat brim to boots. Wide-brimmed hat, dusty coat. They pegged him for some rancher come to bargain for timber or coal. Who you looking for? One of them asked. The overseer, Elias said. I have a matter about the work roll. The guard shrugged. Mr. Cole is always busy, he said. But you can go knock on his office door. If he does not throw you out, that will be your lucky day. Elias led his horse inside and tied it near a tool shed. Then he walked to the one building with glass windows. A board over the door read, Office H. Cole. He knocked twice. Inside, a pen tapped against something hard. Come in. The overseer sat behind the desk. Medium height, a belly spilling over his belt, thick mustache, one hand resting on a big ledger. He flicked his eyes over Elias and did a quick measure. Not a laborer, not company staff, just a lone rancher. What can I do for you? Cole asked. I am looking for a man who worked here, Elias said. An Apache man, older. The name in your book might be different, but his family calls him Mateo. Cole's brows jumped and he gave a dry little laugh. Turner, you know how many men pass through this place? He said. Once they put their mark on the paper, they are labor, not honored guests for me to remember. But you remember money, Elias said, his tone still mild. You remember every dollar the company pays you for each head. Mateo is uncle to one of the women they hung in dry cedar yesterday morning. They will come here, with or without me. Cole's face changed, just a shade. Those women are still alive? They are, Elias said, and they have not forgotten the face of the man who took money to sell their village. The door behind Elias swung open so quietly it did not creak. Sa stepped in first, then Leah and Tiva. They stood in a line behind him. They did not raise their voices, yet the room seemed to shrink around them. Cole looked past Elias and saw 3 dark faces, still marked with fresh bruises, lips pressed tight, eyes level. We did not come here to lay our grief at your feet, Sa said without waiting for an introduction. We came to ask one thing. Mateo, our uncle, where is he? Cole cleared his throat and dragged the ledger closer, flipping through a few pages like a man dragging his memory. Apache older, he muttered. Ah, there was an old fellow. Came in last spring. Worked a few months. Fell on the grade. Died. Buried out at the edge of camp with the rest. Tiva's hands clenched so hard her nails dug into her skin. Did you mark his grave? She asked. Cole lifted one shoulder. There is a stake, a number, no name. The company does not pay for carving stone for dead labor. They come. They die. We write it down here. He lifted the book. And that is enough. What do you write? Leia asked. Her voice was rough but steady. Day they came. Day they died. Cause, Cole said. No room for some long native name. Saw stepped closer. Her hand tightened on the edge of his desk. You signed the papers that sold our village to the Southern mining outfit, she said, each word slow. You stood and watched while they tied my father and my brother. You took the money and turned your back. Now you tell us our uncle is just a number on a stake out there. How do you sleep? Cole gave a thin, strained smile, trying to act as if nothing had struck home. Girl, this is business, he said. I follow orders. That land is written as company land. Who happens to be standing on it is another matter. Elias looked at the man behind the desk and saw no monster out of campfire tales. What he saw was the sort of man who had taught himself to believe it was only a signature, only numbers on a page. That did not make it lighter. Show us where they buried him, Elias said. Right now. Cole opened his mouth to refuse, then met the three sisters' gaze. For a heartbeat, he seemed to understand something. There are people who do not need guns to be dangerous because they no longer have anything left to lose. He cursed under his breath, grabbed his hat, and jerked his chin. Come on then. When we are done, you leave. I want no trouble with company men. Outside the fence, behind the barracks, lay a patch of hard earth. Rough wooden stakes stood in neat rows. Each one had a number scrawled on it in charcoal. The wind carried the smell of dry soil and a faint metallic tang. Cole pointed to a stake near the edge. There, last summer, old Apache, fell, broke his neck, quick death. I should be grateful. Saved us medicine. No one spoke for a long time. Tiva sank to her knees and let a shaking hand press against the ground. Leia stood behind her and set a hand on her shoulder. Saw stared at the stake, then at Elias. In her eyes was a sharp pain he knew, the kind that has nowhere to go. Do you have anything in that book with his name on it? She asked Cole. In the ledger, he said. Third line from the top. Then you will write that name here, Saw said. Her voice suddenly had gone softer. Not in numbers, in letters. His real name, Mateo. You had enough hand to sign people away. You have enough hand to write one name. Cole hesitated. Under their steady stares, he finally pulled a bit of charcoal from his pocket and clumsily scratched 4 crooked letters into the stake. Mateo. Ugly, but readable. All right, Elias said, turning to Cole. You can go. The rest of this has nothing to do with your papers anymore. Cole walked off, his steps heavier than when he came. The 3 sisters and Elias stayed among the stakes. 4 living people gathered around a small square of ground for one who was gone. The wind blew a strand of Tiva's hair across Saw's face. She did not brush it away. We cannot take him home, Leia whispered, her voice thick. But at least here they will not call him by a number anymore. Elias looked down at the name freshly written there and thought of all the others buried with no word carved at all. He knew what they had just done would not undo anything that had been burned and chained and sold. But at the very least, it kept one more life from vanishing into a tally mark in a book. And he knew something else. After this day, whatever lay between him and the 3 Apache sisters would not end with one night under his old wooden roof. They stayed at the burial ground for a long while. No one sobbed out loud. There was only the sound of wind slipping between the rows of wooden stakes and the heavy breathing of the living. At last Saw bowed her head very low, laid her hand on the earth in front of the stake marked Mateo, and whispered a few words in Apache. Leah and Tiva did the same. Elias stepped back a little. He felt as if he were standing at the edge of a family, watching them fold their grief up tight so they could carry it farther down the road. On the way back, no one said much. The sun dropped lower, and the shadows of the four of them stretched across the red ground, long and thin like threads drawn across the field. Near the ranch, Tiva was the first to break the silence. "If Uncle knew somebody wrote his name again," she said softly, "he would laugh. He used to say white men were good at writing papers, but they almost never wrote the right words." "This time," Elias answered, "one word is right at least." When the small wooden house came into view in the faded light, a sudden fear passed through him, because he knew, once the urgent work was done, the next question would come. From here, where would they go? He led the horse into the shed, checked the water trough, fussed with the yard gate, as if he could delay the thing that could not really be put off. In the kitchen, Leah knelt by the stove, coaxing the fire back to life with the easy hands of someone who had tended many fires. Tiva spread the blanket again on the narrow bed in the corner and ran her fingers over the worn seams, like a person checking an old wound. Saw stood out on the porch, eyes turned south, toward the place where their village had once been. Now it was only a patch of land no one called by name. "Turner," Saw said, when Elias stepped out onto the porch, "we have done what we came to do. We know where our uncle went. His name stays on that stake. From here, if we stay, we live in the house of a white man who bought 3 sisters back from death. If we leave, we walk away with nothing." Elias leaned his back against a porch post and looked out over the empty yard. "Do you have anywhere else to go?" he asked. "Not for now," Saw replied. "The old village is gone. Our kin are scattered. But Apaches know how to sleep under the open sky." Elias was quiet for a moment. Then he asked gently, "What if this place is not the house of a man who bought 3 women, but the house of a man who needs more people in his family? What then?" Saw turned toward him. Her eyes sharpened. "What are you saying?" "I am saying," Elias took a slow breath, "this house has been too quiet for 7 years. I carry a debt to an Apache woman who is no longer alive. Today I saw that debt pull 3 more of her people to my door. If the 3 of you stay, not as servants, not as something I have a right to, but as people of this house, then this place is big enough to share." Leah looked up from the doorway, her hands still smudged with ash. "What do people of the house do?" she asked. "They do what family does," Elias said. "They keep the fire going. They keep the roof on. They tend the cattle. They keep each other from getting hung up in any square ever again. Everyone has a voice. Everyone has a name. No one is just a number in anybody's book." Tiva glanced from Saw to Elias. "If one day we want to leave, will you try to hold us?" she asked. "No." Elias shook his head. "I will only keep the door open. Anyone who wants to stay can stay. Anyone who wants to go can carry their share of this place out onto the road. But if you 3 stay long enough, maybe one day folks will point out here and say, 'That is the ranch of Elias and the 3 Apache sisters,' instead of, 'the white man's place with those Indian women he keeps.'" Saw planted her hand on the porch post, eyes narrowed as if she were measuring the distance between words and real life. At last she let out a long breath, and some of the tightness left her shoulders. "I have been sold twice," she said quietly. "Once when they signed the papers and took our land. Once when they hung me up as an example. I will not go through a 3rd sale. If we stay here, it has to be because we choose it. Not because you need to be the good man in your own story." Elias nodded. "I have had years to get used to living alone," he said. No one made me bring you three back. No one made me ride down to that work camp. I do not have anything left to prove to anyone. But if tonight the three of you spread your blankets on this floor, and tomorrow morning scold me because I left dishes all over the table, I think that is a life I can answer for." Silence settled again for a while. Then Tiva gave a small laugh, the first real laugh he had heard from her since they met. "If we stay," she said, "I will scold you a lot. You do not know how to fold a blanket." Leia lifted one shoulder. "I can let you have the stock pens," she said. "The kitchen. Better leave that to me and Tiva. You are bad at starting a fire." Sa still stood there with her palm resting on the porch post, the same post that had weathered so many seasons the way a strong back weathers too many years. At last she rapped her knuckles lightly against the wood, as if knocking on a door inside herself. "All right," she said. "We will try one winter. If, after the winter, we can still say each other's names without feeling them hurt worse than before, then this house is our house." Many years later, if someone rode across the grassland outside Dry Cedar toward evening, they would see 4 chairs on the porch of that old wooden house. One held a white-haired man, not very tall, whittling a piece of wood with no clear plan for what it would become. 3 held Apache women whose hair had gone silver at the temples. Children with brown, deep tan, and copper skin raced in and out of the yard, chattering in English and in Apache, chasing dogs and a couple of fat barn cats. In the kitchen, Leia would bang a spoon on the pot and call everyone in to eat. Out by the pens, Tiva would be showing the youngsters how to tie a leading rope, telling them stories about Uncle Mateo, whose name stood on a stake far away. On the porch, Sa would sit beside Elias, her eyes on the horizon where the work camp once stood. Now and then, very lightly, she would lean her head against his arm. "Am I heavy?" she would ask. "Yes," Elias would say, the corner of his mouth lifting. "But this house is strong enough to hold it. And if one night you find yourself listening to this story after a long day, you might see a little of yourself there. Maybe you were turned into a number in someone's ledger. Maybe you have stood in the middle of your own town square while people pointed and judged. If the road that brought Elias and Sa and her sisters together has touched a quiet corner of your heart, I hope you will stay with these Western tales. If this story softened your heart even a little, go ahead and subscribe. So each evening we can sit together again under a Western porch roof and listen to another gentle story.